Good evening. We're in Mark chapter 11. If you want to go ahead and turn to Mark 11, we're in verse 27. 27 through the end of the chapter will be the last story in chapter 11. We move into chapter 12, but you kind of, in a lot of Mark, you can kind of ignore the chapter divisions because the thought and the scene kind of continues from one chapter to the next, so it's really not changing the scene all that much, even when you move from chapter 11, 27 into chapter 12, verse 1 and following. But what happens in verse 27 of the Gospel of Mark beginning is that Jesus' authority is being challenged by the religious leaders of the day. So he's just cleansed the temple. There's this reference back now to the withered fig tree. There's this reference where he explains it then to the disciples. And now, as he's coming back into Jerusalem after this day that he cleansed the temple, the chief priests, scribes, and the elders came to him. And their question is, what is your authority? What are you using as your authority to do these things that you're doing? Well, what had he just done? Well, he'd cleansed the temple. He'd used authority to run the ones out of the temple that were abusing the temple. They had turned his father's house into a den of thieves or robbers, and so he runs them out. He turns over the tables. The one account even gives some more specific terms about running them out. But the whole idea is he is now approached by these religious leaders, the Jewish leaders, and their question is, where do you get your authority? By what authority are you doing these things? Who gave you this authority? Where did it come from? That's the question that they ask. So let's pick up verse 27, and I'll read all the way through the end of the chapter, which will be verse 33. And they came again to Jerusalem, that is Jesus and the disciples. And as he was walking in the temple, the chief priests and the scribes and the elders came to him, and they said to him, by what authority are you doing these things? Or who gave you this authority to do them? Jesus said to them, I will ask you one question, answer me, and I will tell you by what authority I do these things. Was the baptism of John from heaven or from man? Answer me. And they discussed it with one another, saying, if we say from heaven, he will say, why then did you not believe him? But shall we say from man? They were afraid of the people, for they all held that John really was a prophet. So they answered Jesus, we do not know. And Jesus said to them, neither will I tell you by what authority I do these things. So Jesus answers their question. Their question is, where do you get your authority? And he answers their question with a question. This master teacher, he's not going to put himself in a dilemma, not going to put himself on the horns of a dilemma, where if you either way you answer, then you're going to be in trouble. He's not going to do that. So what he does is he poses to them a question which is similar in nature. Either way they answer, then they're going to be in trouble. That horns of a dilemma. You answer, it's from heaven, then why didn't you obey John if you believe John's teaching is from heaven? Why didn't you obey it? If we say on the other side, it's not from God, it's from men, then we're going to set the masses against us. And I believe it's Luke's account that says something about they will stone us, or says something like that. I believe it's Luke's account that says that. So that Luke takes it a little bit further than they're going to be angry at us, because in the text he says if we say it's from man, they reasoned within themselves because they were afraid of the people, because the people believed that John really was a prophet. So if we say yes, we believe it's from man, then we're going to set the people against us. So we can't answer that question. So they're cowards, right? They're cowards. They're not going to answer, because if we say one of those things, then there are negative consequences either way. So we're going to refuse to answer. So these religious leaders who should know, who should be in the know, who should have studied it, know it, understand the situation, they should have investigated Jesus, because they've had plenty of time. He's been out in the open. They should have been listening, observing. They should have been investigating, but they've already determined that he has to die. And so here, as they pose this question to him, where do you get your authority to do what you do? He says, let me pose you a question. And they say, we don't know. We don't know. Cowards. They refuse to answer. And Jesus says, well, since you're not going to answer me, then I don't have an obligation to answer you on the question that you ask me. It's not, there's no reason for me to answer that, since you refuse to answer that simple question I ask you. So they're dishonest, aren't they? They're very dishonest because they won't say what they believe. Jesus asked them a straightforward question, and they won't say what they believe. They refuse to answer, so they're very dishonest. And maybe there's some fear that's a reality here. When Luke states the fact that they're afraid they'll be stoned by the people, that's a very relevant thought there. But if you're going to be a religious leader, you got to make those tough decisions. If you're going to be these people who are the guide for the people, the ones that are leadership, then you got to make those kind of decisions. Did it come from God, or is it from man? Is he a real prophet from God, or who is he? And so they're dishonest in the way they deal with this. They're going to base it on what's going to happen to them, or the outcome of the situation. So Jesus' response then, if you won't tell me by what authority John did what he did, then I'm not going to tell you where I got my authority. They are unwilling. They were cowardly in nature. They're unwilling to be honest with the question that Jesus posed. And in all of this dishonesty and their view of the situation, the question that was asked, the lack of sincerity and their inability to come to a decision really shows who they are. And I think part of the consequence of them coming to Jesus and posing that is that Jesus reveals who they really are. Did they come to really find out about Jesus, or were they trying to pin him to the wall? Well, it's pretty obvious they were not sincere. They were not being honest, and they came to Jesus with impure motives. And when they come to him, they come and then they ask, where did you get your authority to do this? All right, that's 27 through 33. That's the authority of Jesus being challenged. And you probably are aware now, we've talked about it enough along the way, that anytime that Jesus does something, he'll perform some miracles, or there will be some significant moment. The thing that's going to follow that is opposition. There's going to be opposition. And so here you have the triumphal entry, the cleansing of the temple, and the teaching of the withered fig tree, the fig tree that had the leaves but no figs, and it withers the next day, or when they come back through. And so the next day they're coming back into Jerusalem, and he is confronted by these religious leaders. And so now you have that confrontation or the challenge against Jesus. So this is a usual following of events in the Gospel of Mark, as Mark shows. When Jesus does something, the natural process is going to be that he's going to be questioned. There's going to be opposition. There's going to be some kind of confrontation with the religious leaders of the day. All right, what are your observations? Anything?
See, this is interesting because they reason among themselves. If we say from heaven, then he's going to say, "Why didn't you read?"
Mm-hmm.
About the baptism of John, because obviously they already knew that John had pointed to Jesus and said, they already knew that. They knew that John had identified Jesus as the Messiah to come, as the Lamb of God who take away the sins of the world. So if he said, yeah, he's from heaven, then obviously his authority was from heaven, from God, that he really is the Son of God, and he's the Messiah. Mm-hmm. And they don't want to admit that.
No, if they admit that, then they have a real dilemma on their hands for sure. So they're stuck either way they go. And Randy points out the big deal about if they admit that John's baptism was from God, and a part of that teaching of John was this man that you're speaking to now is the Son of God, the Lamb of God, then you have quite a pickle on your hands for sure.
If you're trying to find something wrong with somebody, all us, people, you can find something wrong with our lives, but don't you know that everybody, them folks, if they couldn't find nothing wrong with Jesus, they couldn't find nothing he did wrong or said wrong, or it had to be aggravating to. I had to be just, I had to just eat at them like crazy to me.
Yeah, Barry's observation is how anytime that you want to find some dirt on most anybody, you can find it, but they couldn't find any on Jesus. And as a matter of fact, every time that they confronted him or challenged him, he wins the argument every single time. And that's frustrating when you can't win the argument.
Well, Barry, in a roundabout way, he showed his authority with the answer he gave. Because like he said, over in Luke, these guys say, hey, if we agree with that, we're going to get stoned. Mm-hmm. So he showed them authority just by the answer.
He did. Tommy's observation that even though Jesus didn't answer the question, he demonstrated that he had the supreme authority by the way that this conversation unfolds. He demonstrated that for sure.
So Jesus knew what they were going to ask before they even thought about asking.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
That's crazy.
Yeah. But even, he did, but even if he hadn't, he was going to answer correctly. He was going to do the right thing. Why do you think the conversation ends that way? I usually don't ask why do you think questions about biblical investigation, because what I think really doesn't matter. But the reason I ask that question is when I looked at this story, and it just comes to this point where Jesus just says, "This is the end of it. It's the end of it. There's no more to be said." And we're moving on. And the next verse simply says they came to Jericho. So it's not like there was any meandering or any more, they didn't follow him anymore. So why did it come to what seems to be an abrupt ending? Why did it come to that abrupt end? Mm-hmm.
Another illegitimate reason to kill him. And so why should he bother? Why should he bother with these people? I mean, it doesn't have anything to do with them. So, and he's going to come to the next chapter to bring that up too. But I mean, why bother?
Yeah, good observation.
And there, did it continue in chapter 12?
Well,
It says, and he began to speak to them in parables.
yeah, I was in the wrong chapter. Yeah, they didn't go to Jericho in chapter 12. You might think.
I was wondering.
Yeah, I was trying to make sure y'all are still with me. Yeah. Yeah, I flipped my page, and so I looked at chapter 11, or 10, whatever I was looking at. Yeah, chapter 12. It does kind of continue because these are the continuing words of Jesus, right? But the confrontation with those religious leaders, it cuts off abruptly. Now Jesus continues the teaching about that moment. So why do you think it cuts off so abruptly? John gave his observation. I thought you were.
Well, one of the things that he could have just said, well, he still saying, Lord, will I tell you all authority to do these things? By John's authority, you know I do these things. That would really make it look bad.
Yeah.
They couldn't have denied that, because then they would have been, again. But that was not his authority.
Mm-hmm.
His authority was from God himself. And so it really, didn't depend upon what man thought of it. And so he talks about in John 5, I think, I don't know the exact verse, I think it's in John 5, where you have sent John, and I think in verse 33, John 5, you sent John, and he has testified to the truth, but the testimony which I received was not from man. But I say these things so that you may be saved. He was that lamp that burning and shining light that you were willing to rejoice in that just like for a while. But the testimony which I have is greater than the authority of John. For the works which the Father has given me to accomplish, the very works that I do testify about me, that my Father has sent me. So he said, I don't need John's testimony.
Mm-hmm. Right. So one of the testimonies about Jesus was John, but he also there in those verses, he gives other testimonies as well. He's going to even talk about not only God being a testimony, but the Word of God as a testimony. No. No. Mm-hmm.
Their way into these positions from Herod, who was an Idumean, which is an Edomite,
Edomite.
and the people knew this. They didn't believe that Herod was the true king or that the chief priests were the true. They were always in fear of the people.
Okay.
And the people were just looking for a reason to throw them out.
Yeah,
They knew
exactly.
that.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, that's one of the two priests, high priests.
Yes.
Because one had been appointed by the king, and didn't like the other one.
Yeah.
So,
You ever reach the point? Oh, go ahead.
The people were just looking for an excuse, and they knew that.
They knew that, yeah. You ever reached a point in a conversation where you knew that the person was not going to be honest and listen to what you had to say and reason? Well, this is where Jesus is, right? When they answer the way they do, and he knows what they're thinking, they're mulling this over. If we say that John's baptism was from God, and this is going to happen. If we say it's from men, then this is going to happen. So Jesus knows that. He knows they're dishonest, and he just, it seems, says there's no need to try to convince you any further about who I am or what I stand for, where I came from, or my authority. There's no need. I mean, there's no need. Mm-hmm. No, he had to die. That decision had been made a long time ago, even in the Gospel of Mark. It had been quite some time that decision was already made. So the conversation stops, and it has to, because they're dishonest. It doesn't matter what Jesus says. It doesn't matter what kind of convincing proof he gives them. It's not going to change their mind because they're dishonest. 2 + 2 is 4. Well, I don't believe that. Well, look, 1, 2, 1, 2. Add them up, 4. No, I don't believe that. What do you do? I'm through. I can't do any more. So Jesus, okay, we're done. If you're not going to be honest, if you're not going to be open to truth, then there's no more conversation that needs to take place. So chapter 12 then, as we move into chapter 12, it opens up with Jesus then begins to speak to them in parables. And you have this first parable here in this section that is the parable of the vineyard. Remember, we talked a little bit about when Jesus, in chapter 11 there, where Jesus curses the fig tree. And we talked a little bit about how that even in the Old Testament, there's a lot of teaching that is used around vineyards, fig trees, olive groves, a lot of teaching about things that they would understand, being agricultural in nature. A lot about sheep and goats and, all of those things. Barley, all those things are significant because it's things that the people knew about. So as he begins to talk about, to instruct his disciples, those that are concerned with truth, when he's trying to instruct them, one of the things he's going to do is use things that they are familiar with, things that they would understand. So he's going to talk about this vineyard as he begins in verse 1. Actually, it goes through, we'll read through 12 because all that kind of connects. And he began to speak to them in parables. A man planted a vineyard and put a fence around it and dug a pit for the winepress and built a tower and leased it to tenants and went into another country. When the season came, he sent a servant to the tenants to get from them some of the fruit of the vineyard. And they took him and beat him and sent him away empty-handed. Again, he sent to them another servant, and they struck him on the head and treated him shamefully. And he sent another, and him they killed. And so with many others. Some they beat, and some they killed. He had still one other, a beloved son. Finally, he sent him to them, saying, "They will respect my son." But those tenants said to one another, "This is the heir. Come, let us kill him, and the inheritance will be ours." And they took him and killed him and threw him out of the vineyard. What will the owner of the vineyard do? He will come and destroy the tenants and give the vineyard to others. Have you not read the scripture? The stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. This was the Lord's doing, and it is marvelous in our eyes. And they were seeking to arrest him, but feared the people, for they perceived that he had told the parable against them. So they left him and went away. So it seems that even though Jesus didn't continue an argument, so to speak, with these religious leaders that it began in chapter 11, Jesus continues to teach indirectly, and they get it. We perceive that he's talking about us. Yes, very likely. Mm-hmm. So this, to me, there's very little need to do a lot of explaining because it seems very straightforward that when you look at what is depicted here by Jesus as a man who owns this vineyard and leases it out to tenants, and they go to take what is rightfully the owner's, which would be a portion of the fruit, a portion of that to pay for them. They would be, that would be the payment. You would give a portion of that fruit. So they go to collect the payment, and they beat and they kill everyone that sent. And finally, he sends his son, and they say, well, this is the heir. And so if we kill the heir, then maybe that means we'll get the inheritance, or we'll get to keep this vineyard. So they kill the son, and their reasoning was very faulty, because what happens is the owner looks at this situation and he destroys the tenants and gives the vineyard away to others. And then Jesus quotes from Isaiah. Anyway, Jesus quotes there from, I think it's Isaiah. I don't have a footnote on that, but about the builders rejecting the cornerstone. Same idea. These folks that are supposed to be the ones that know or in the know, and they're supposed to be the religious leaders of the day, and they reject that which is the chief cornerstone. They reject the one who's come. So you have a kind of a double, 1-2 punch. The parable of the tenants, killing even the son of the owner, and then you have this reference, the builders rejecting the cornerstone of the building. So this is a parable that's not difficult to understand. It's one of those that I like because it's pretty straightforward, and the things that are represented there are not difficult. But it is, I think, every time I read it, I'm still shocked at the action of the tenants, aren't you? I'm just still shocked every time. But when you look at the way Jesus has been and is being and will be treated, it is the perfect description of how the people are that are in control, the people that are in charge, the people that God has given the kingdom to temporarily, how they have treated the son of the owner of the vineyard. So it's though it's always shocking, it's not surprising, because it's a great illustration of what's taking place. Exactly, yeah. Yeah, Glenn points out the parallel that the tenants wanted to hang on to what they had, and these religious leaders want to hang on to what they've got. And Ryan's already referred to the fact that they were gaining a lot from this position that they held, not just money, but a lot of power and potential to gain money even in the future. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, they were supposed to be the ones building, and I refer to the kingdom loosely there. But it is still in a very physical way the kingdom of God in the present moment, as Jesus is dealing with these who are responsible for building the kingdom of God, which was the nation of Israel, from that perspective, and they failed miserably. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, without that one, the house will never stand. It won't survive. So what's the response now? Verse 12. What's the response of the religious elite? You see that? Jesus teaches a very simple parable, very straightforward, and they are smart enough to realize he's talking about us. He's talking about us. And they were seeking to arrest him, but feared the people, for they perceived that he had told the parable against them. So they left him and went away. That little phrase, they were seeking to arrest him, is continual, which means any opportunity we get, we're going to arrest him, but this is a bad time. This is not the right time, because if we arrest him now, the people are going to see through us, because we perceive this parable that he just told is about us, and if we perceive that, the people probably do as well. Exactly. Yes. John's statement is about the time that they finally did decide to arrest him, and it was under the cover of darkness. And it was at the time when, right before daylight, so everybody's in bed. There's no crowd. There are no people to resist this, and they're going to be able to not only arrest him, but get him back into town and get him under trial before most folks know anything's happened. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Ryan's comment about what is going to take place in a matter of 4 decades or less. AD 70, the city, the temple, it's just going to be, it'll be gone. And for them, that is the ultimate of embarrassment and shock and shame, for them to lose everything. Right. Still can't build it. All right, any other observations? Chapter 12, 1 through 12 is quite a detailed look at what Jesus says in this parable about how God himself is going to bring judgment upon the nation of Israel, specifically the religious leaders, because of their unwillingness to receive the Son that has been sent to them. And not only did they not receive him, but they killed him. Okay, look at verses 13. I think 13 through 17 is quite significant, and this is going to be the kind of it's the kind of paragraph, the kind of section, the kind of interaction that is again one that was meant to snare him, meant to draw him in and confront him with some kind of dilemma, the horns of a dilemma, where he has to make a decision, and when he makes that decision, then we're going to be able to capture him. We're going to be able to arrest him. We're going to be able to do whatever we need to do to get him out of the picture, and this one doesn't work either. So let's see what happens. Verse 13, this is about the question of paying taxes. And they sent to him some of the Pharisees and some of the Herodians to trap him in his talk. By the way, those two were left wing and right wing, weren't they, Ryan? Yeah, they hated each other. It would be like as far left as you could get and as far right as you could get, as liberal and as conservative as you could get politically and religiously, I guess. And they've come together in a common enemy, and they come to trap him. So that's what you have here. The Herodians and the Pharisees. Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. The Herodians would pay more than their fair share, I guess. And they came to him and said, verse 14, Teacher, we know that you are true and do not care about anyone's opinion, for you are not swayed by appearances, but truly teach the way of God. Now hold on a minute. Did they believe that? No, they didn't. One of the skills of the good politician of the first century was to lay down the praise very thick, to be able to draw them in and puff them up by the way that you build them up with your words. You remember in chapter 12 of the book of Acts when Herod dies, he's eaten with worms. And the people are praising him. The people don't believe. That's not the way they feel. Oh, this is the voice of a God, not of a man. Oh, praise you, oh King. You're wonderful. You're so amazing. And under their breath, they're saying, "You dirty, no good. You won't even give us food and water." So they're trying to build up. Well, they're using this. I guess it was a Greek philosopher's kind of introduction to get somebody loosened up and to praise them in a way that, hey, I am pretty good, aren't I? I appreciate you giving me all of this great praise because I really deserve that. But that's not going to work on Jesus. It would work on Herod, and it probably would work on a lot of good politicians. But they throw all this out there. We know that you're true, do not care about anyone's opinion. Now, what they say is true, but they don't believe it. They're not concerned about that. What they're concerned about is trapping him, because the first thing that's said is the Pharisees and some Herodians come to trap him in his talk. Mm-hmm. Yeah, good point. Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah. That's what's happened here. If we're going to get this Jesus guy, we've got to join forces, and so they do. So is it lawful? Okay, here's the question. This is the middle of verse 14. You truly teach the way of God. Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? Should we pay them or should we not? Now, Jesus knows their heart, so the next phrase is Jesus knows they're hypocrites. Jesus knows why they came. He knows that they came to trap him, and he sees through all of this praise and the lauding on of all of this stuff that they're saying here that really means nothing. He knows they are hypocrites. And the first thing out of his mouth is, why do you put me to the test? Now, it doesn't stop there, because so what Jesus is going to do, he's going to go on and use this physical illustration when he says, bring me a coin, bring me this coin. It's going to be a Roman coin. Why do you put me to the test? Straightforward. You think their eyes went big? I don't know what happened. I have no idea what happened right there, but he was just straight out. I know why you're here. I know what you're doing. I know what you're trying to do. My time's up. We'll start back there and we'll finish this next time, but we are about to be interrupted, I fear. Thank you for your comments.